Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Wellness Musings with Meg podcast. Today's episode is going to be aimed at sort of people who are new to a yoga journey or maybe considering starting yoga classes or a yoga practice. Maybe you've stumbled across this channel and you've kind of gone, oh, okay, I started out maybe stretching, but actually I want to learn more. And so this is a video that's kind of a good place to start. And at the moment, I have 6 things written down of kind of 6 things to be aware of and to have a little bit of knowledge on or to kind of understand before you start your yoga journey. I might end up adding on to these 6 by the end of it. I'm not quite sure. But these are definitely 6 things that I think it's very important to be aware of when you're in your yoga journey. So yeah, let's get straight in, let's get started, and I will see you on the other side. Hi, my name is Meg, and you are listening to the Wellness Musings with Meg podcast. I am a fully qualified beautician and yoga teacher who has studied and worked in health and wellness since 2017. I have been obsessed with wellness my entire life and have always wanted to share my passions more. If you love health, wellness, and yoga and want to learn more, this podcast is for you. I will be bringing you all things wellness from diet and lifestyle to beauty tips and tricks, and of course, yoga as well. So grab yourself a green tea and find a tranquil spot, and let's jump in. So I'm going to say in the beginning of this, and I'm going to come clean here, and that these are actually all things that I personally didn't, some of these anyway, these were all things I personally didn't know when I started my yoga journey. And that's not right, because my yoga journey, or when I started, I did things backwards. So I was offered the opportunity to become a yoga teacher. And this was really kind of before I'd learned yoga properly as a student. Whereas I think it is important, if you are ever wanting to become a teacher, you should definitely have at least a year's worth of classes before you then become a teacher and start doing the teacher training, or kind of going down that route. So my knowledge was then kind of flipped. So I ended up learning the asana before anything else, and I didn't learn the basics. And so then as I'd been teaching for like a year before I even realized some of this stuff, because the qualification, my first qualification that I got in yoga, I wouldn't say would be the best qualification to go for. It's good as an add-on block if you're already qualified. So when I then got that qualification and I then started kind of realizing all of these different points in yoga, it made me realize, oh my God, like I should have been taught all of this. This is like basic 101. People need to know this before they start a yoga journey. And I honestly think whether you're a student or whether you're a teacher, these are all really important things to know. So my very first point is that yoga originated in India and it has a very rich tradition. I think yoga it's so used in the Western world, and I do think like the Western world has done some good things for yoga, but I also think it has harmed it a little bit. And if you're a teacher especially, I think it's really important to teach your students that yoga has a really rich history, and yoga originated in India hundreds of thousands of years ago. Like, it is such a long-standing practice that had hours of people devoting their lives to creating this practice. It is the ultimate thing to help with eliminating suffering in the mind, the body, and the spirit. And it's not something that should be taken lightly. It's not something, it should be given a lot of respect, in my opinion, because it's such an incredible practice. So if you're a yoga teacher or a student starting your journey, starting to learn more about yoga, please respect its history and please respect its traditions, especially if you're a teacher, because I do think you have a responsibility to teach your students that these things about yoga, that it isn't just something that's, been around for a few years and it's good for this and it's good for that. I always say yoga is very three-dimensional. It's not just a conventional exercise. A lot of people will lump yoga and Pilates together, and don't get me wrong, I actually love Pilates. I do Pilates classes. I think they're amazing. But yoga and Pilates are so different in that yoga is very 3D, and Pilates is quite two-dimensional. So yoga, actually, let's take this on to my next point. Yoga is not just movement, and there are 8 limbs or 8 parts of yoga. So this is how I can separate yoga from Pilates. And this for me, again, in the beginning was something that people would be like, so what's the difference between yoga and Pilates? And I couldn't answer that question for a really long time until I started learning the history, the tradition, the philosophy. And so now I can very easily explain the difference between yoga and Pilates. Pilates is an exercise. Pilates is all physical. Yoga is not. Yoga has 8 limbs, so 8 different parts to it, or conventionally, that's kind of the easiest way to explain it. So you've got your yamas and your niyamas, which are your first limbs of yoga. And these are your ways of approaching yourself and approaching the world around you. So whether that's kindness, cleanliness, telling the truth, like it's all these different points. And what I find very nice about these is they often will follow like religious 10 commandments. Like for example, the 10 commandments in Christianity are quite similar to your yamas and niyamas in a way, like there's a crossover. So it's about like how you approach your life, because yoga is not just about being on the mat. It's not just, you don't just do yoga when you're on your yoga mat. It's a way of life, it's a way of being. And again, that separates it from Pilates and most other exercises, in that it's not just you don't just dedicate an hour to doing yoga and that's it, you stop. It's something that you carry throughout your life. So you start off with your yamas and your niyamas, then you go into asana, which is your physical practice of yoga, and what most people nowadays in the Western world consider to only be yoga. And this is why they get confused, because they think that it's all just this physical practice. And there are hundreds, I'd even say thousands, maybe even millions now, of different types of yoga classes. Some I would say are worth investing in more than others. Some are more about the, how do I say this? Keep it traditional. I think that's the best thing to say. If you're looking at yoga classes, a lot of, especially in the Western world, they it's all about making money and trying to create the next big thing and this and that, and they forget I think sometimes these classes forget the foundations of what yoga is and the tradition. And this is what happens when you start playing around with yoga and playing around with different types and creating different types of yoga, in that isn't, when it began, it's such a specific practice. It's done so delicately, and it's so easy to misteach, forget why you're teaching it, and you're not going to get the same benefit from it. I hope that makes sense. But once you've done your asana, you'll then go into your pranayamas, is your next limb, which is all about breath work. And then from there, you have 4 different types of meditation. So again, this is the easiest way to separate it from Pilates or other exercises, in that there's yoga's, the emphasis on your mind is so much more. Yoga is not a religion, but it is a way of life in a way, in that you take it with you all the time. You use yoga in every situation that you're in daily life. You do practice it every day, or you should try to practice it every day. And it's about eliminating suffering from the mind, the body, and the spirit. This is what makes it three-dimensional compared to other exercises, I guess, in that Pilates is literally about, or like other exercises, they're literally about exercising. And like, for example, mindfulness is very much one thing. I guess in some ways it's an element of yoga, but it's not yoga. Um, I hope this all makes sense, but it's important if you're starting your yoga journey, whether you're a teacher, again, a student, you need to understand that yoga is not just physical, it's not just movement. There is a lot to it, a lot more than just that to it. And you will never know everything about yoga. And this is something that for me, I actually find very hard to deal with, I guess, because I'm somebody that wants to know everything. Like when I get hooked on a subject or when I want to learn something, I want to be, I want to have as much information as possible. But yoga, I cannot express enough how deep this tradition goes, how specific this tradition is, how delicate this tradition is, and how vast this tradition is. It is incredibly vast. There is hours and years of people have dedicated their entire existence to creating and furthering yoga, especially like there's been like Sanskrit literature, and people, this is like before people could write properly and people could, it's like I can't even explain how rich and vast and how incredible the history of yoga is and how much information there is. It's absolutely mind-blowing, and this is why you'll never know all of yoga, certainly not in one lifetime. And from this point, I think it kind of moves quite nicely onto my next one, in that I do really cannot express enough, because of these eight limbs of yoga and because of how vast yoga is and how much knowledge there is. It's very hard to navigate it on your own, and having a good quality teacher or guru is very important. And I think it's worth doing your research into said teacher and into said guru. And I mean, I know I have my YouTube channel there, but my YouTube channel keeps everything very simple. It doesn't talk necessarily about like the philosophies and stuff like that, because it's impossible to do an online yoga class and make it what that student specifically needs. I like the fact that my classes on YouTube do work for people, because, you know, if you're someone that's struggling with neck pain or back pain, the asana of yoga can really help. And that's what my kind of channel primarily focuses on. But if you're someone who really wants to get nitty gritty properly into yoga and learn it properly, you need a teacher and you need a guru, and certainly a guru if you are somebody who wants to learn more about the philosophy and really take this into a deep practice. And also, you know, even if you're not wanting to, a good teacher will help you because they can see exactly what you're doing, and they can modify where things are. So, for example, again, with my channel, I can't see what everyone else is doing. So, yes, you can follow along with me, but I can't correct you if there's something wrong. So, it's worth having a teacher, and it's worth investing in a good quality teacher. Yoga is extremely personal to every person as well, and what will look one way for one person will look very different to somebody else, which is another reason again why a teacher is good, because they can personalize it for you and make it to what you need. Yoga can be generic in a way, in that if you're practicing the eight limbs, it will sort of help and work for everybody. But in those eight limbs, it's each section is so vast that it's then important to kind of go down the right route. I would even go as far as to say, if you're completely new, it's worth looking for somebody who maybe has Indian heritage, because they will have grown up um, with all of that culture and with all of that learning from the moment they were born. You know, if their family is Hindi and they've grown up with yoga from the moment they were born, they're going to have so much more knowledge. And this is coming from someone who obviously doesn't have Indian heritage and doesn't have that background. But I can understand as a teacher how, if you've grown up in that culture and surrounded and immersed yourself in that culture, and it's not to say that there aren't teachers who aren't from India that aren't fantastic at all. There are hundreds and there are thousands of them, but depending on how vast, how deep you want to take your knowledge, that's kind of a good place to start. I do think is worth looking at, kind of, and it respects that culture, it respects that history, in that the ancestors, you're kind of respecting those as teachers and learning from them, from the knowledge that has been passed down generations through their family and through their gurus. But yoga is so personal and it is internal. It's not something, and this is where we struggle in social media, and that it's not something that you see. And unfortunately, in social media, especially with asana, it's about how it looks, especially for teachers. I'm one of these people. If people aren't going to click on my videos and people aren't going to click on and be interested in me as a teacher, if what I'm doing doesn't look a little bit aesthetically pleasing. But it's not about that. My personal practice isn't about how it looks. It's very hard to portray like yamas and niyamas, how you work in your life. It's very hard to portray like the meditation side. It's really hard to portray and to show these, and that's because yoga is internal, it's not external. It's all about what's going on within and not what's going on the outside. And yoga isn't easy. This is my last point. Yoga is not an easy thing to do. I say this to my students all the time, especially when they come. I teach a lot of vinyasa, and vinyasa can be really difficult. And I'll finish the class and be like, oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting that. And I'll go, yeah, well, you've started, and vinyasa is very difficult, but I would go as far as to say that most yoga is incredibly difficult, because it is about shutting the mind off, being in the moment, focusing on your breath, being present, completely dedicating that time and energy to your body and exactly what it's doing. But vinyasa is hard in that you're also working on strength and you're working on flexibility. But if it was easy, everybody would do it. If it was an easy thing to do, people wouldn't pay for yoga classes, people wouldn't pay to become teachers. It wouldn't be a hugely incredible source that people still use hundreds and thousands of years after it was invented. So yoga is not easy, and I think especially if you're brand new to yoga, I think a lot of people come to my classes and go, oh, I'm just going to lie there and fall asleep and maybe stretch my leg a little bit. And that is not yoga at all. Yoga is a challenge. Yoga is difficult. Even when you're in shavasana and you're just lying there in shavasana, it's your final resting pose, I'll actually say that that can often be the most difficult pose, because for the whole 5, 10, 15 minutes that you're in shavasana, you are literally focusing on something. The whole point is not to drift your mind away. It's to keep it in the moment. It's to keep it focused. Whatever your plan throughout shavasana is, it's to keep it there. We're not drifting off. We're not just having a nap. It's about keeping the mind focused, but focused on nothing. It's very difficult. Yoga is incredible, but it's the same with any sport, I guess. Anything that you invest a lot of time, energy, you will get such an incredible reward from doing yoga. I mean, it changed my life, and that's why I teach it, and that's why I started this channel, because I do genuinely think that everybody should have access to the knowledge and some teachings and some understanding of yoga, because it is incredible. But I do think it's really important that, especially in the Western world, we don't forget these things, because they are the things that make yoga what it is. And if you try and forget or drop these points off, you're no longer practicing yoga. These are like your foundations, the most important parts, or some of the most important parts, that give the yoga the respect that it deserves. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you guys have got any questions about starting a yoga journey, anything like that, always drop a comment on here. I love to hear from you guys. And I'm also on Instagram and TikTok as well, which is the same handle as my YouTube, so Meg Joy Smith. If you've ever got any questions, drop me a message. I love to hear from you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will speak to you very soon. Thanks. Bye.